Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the FOURQUET debate, and we're second-guessing, or rather guessing, what Donald Trump's policy towards China is going to be after that telephone call he got over the weekend from the president of Taiwan that he took and that he talked about taking, and the announcement this Wednesday of a very pro-Beijing pick for ambassador to China, the governor of Iowa. With us to talk about it, James Lacey, former trade official in the Reagan administration, Trump delegate at the Republican convention from California. He's in Los Angeles, the author of Taxifornia. Welcome back. Welcome back as well to Andre Luz Krog-Petri, the founder of A Capital. We're with Yann, the founder of Feda Consulting, which brings together Chinese and French and European businesses. Exactly. And also with us, Alice Ekman of the French Political Science Institute, IFRI. Thank you for being with us. We can show you what the Chinese Foreign Ministry has said about that phone call that we've been talking about. Their spokesperson, the foreign minister himself, playing down the call, saying it was a petty ruse, a small trick by Taiwan. It will not change the international bedrock of the one China policy that the U.S. government has adhered to go for years. Of course, we don't hope it will be interfered with or damaged in any form. I must say, Yann, the reactions have been very hard in the press, but the official reactions have been understated on the part of the Chinese.
So far there haven't yet many reports, on the call between Trump and Taiwan, and I think the Chinese government tries to minimize the impact of this call. So that's why they said that it's just a small trick of Taiwan. And I think also the one China policy, which has been confirmed or on the international plan since 1979, it will be really difficult to change that, because for all the countries which wished to establish the official relationship with China, we had to, firstly admit this principle. So for the time being, I think for Taiwan, even that they plan to do some changes, I think it will be difficult to really change that over the short and medium.
James Lacey, you agree that the one China policy is not going to go away?
Yeah, I don't think that just accepting this call is going to change the overarching policy. But, what you've just heard is a statement that China basically agrees with Donald Trump, that this call was no big deal. And I think that Trump was basically accepting congratulations with an understanding that Taiwan does have a relationship with China. But I don't think that it signals any huge policy difference. I think that it underscores the fact that Trump campaigned stating that there were all these policy issues with China that he hoped to address when he became president, and I think he's on that road.
Alice Ekman, on this point, it's just a phone call?
It's a phone call in an already tense context. We have to remember that there were presidential in Taiwan as well before the US election, right? And we have a new elected Taiwanese president, at least acting as a president, and is considered as such in Taiwan, which is called Tsai Ing-wen, which is DPP. We don't have, her party and herself don't have such good relation with Beijing in comparison with the KMT, who was previously
and there are fears
power.
she might try to declare independence. How founded are those fears in Beijing?
Declaration of independence, I don't think it's really on the program, given that you have a lot of. It is a very subtle issue, cross-strait relation. But what is sure is that the situation is tense because of the 1992 consensus. What we call the 1992 consensus is something that both Taiwan and Taipei and Beijing kind of agreed in 1992, saying that there is one China, but they have a different definition of what is China. Taipei considered that China is ROC, whereas Beijing considered that China is PRC. Tsai Ing-wen, current Taiwanese president, is not comfortable with this expression, so she has not formally mentioned this expression in her inaugural speech in May, or right after the election in December and then January. So already before the call, Beijing was quite unhappy with Tsai, with the current Taiwanese administration, and the situation was quite tense. At many levels, less tourists going, mainland Chinese tourists going to Taiwan. You know, you have a vast, significant amount of Chinese tourists visiting Taiwan, and this number has increased during the KMT presidency, the previous presidency in Taiwan. Then you have also pressure from Beijing on what we say the international space of Taiwan in international summits, organizations, and meetings. And then you also had, since September, PLA aircraft flying over Taiwan. So the situation is already tense. So if you take this context into account, yes, the phone call is more than symbolic because it's tension over tension.
All right, on the hashtag F24 debate, Handsome Jake tweeting, the Trump-Taiwan issue to me isn't that he accepted the call. The problem to me is that he has no idea that it was an issue. Our panel, of course, in disagreement on that. But James Lacey, let me ask you, regarding these revelations that there was lobbying on the part of the former Vice President and Senator Bob Dole, is Dole the man whispering in Trump's ear?
Well, it should come as no surprise that Taiwan has been lobbying in the United States for a number of years. As a matter of fact, when the diplomatic relationship changed in 1979, Taiwan's diplomatic presence reverted to basically a nonprofit organization. And from that point forward, they've had many lobbyists that have been trying to help them, specifically with purchases of military equipment so that they could protect themselves from the mainland Chinese. And they do have a big military in Taiwan, and they're an awful big customer of the United States for military. So most of the lobbying has been to try and focus on getting updated equipment and defensive works for Taiwan. And
but we saw also the robust language in the Republican Party platform that came out of the convention.
Well, that's no surprise either. I mean, you know, I've attended the 1980, 1984, 1988, and 2016 Republican National Conventions, and all of those delegates at all of those conventions could articulate a pro-Taiwan policy, even though we have this one China policy and we had the derecognition in 1979. But the reality is that Taiwan is a functioning economy. The trade relationship is very important with the United States. And this current diplomatic situation that we've had for the last 40 years is becoming almost farcical. Now, I don't think that the U.S. will be changing its one China policy, but I do think that Taiwan is an arrow in President Trump's quiver to try and do the things that need to be done to equalize the trade relationship with China and improve the U.S. economy.
All right, we were talking, it's exactly what Andre was saying just before the break, Yann Li, which is here's a guy who's going to turn the tables on China and give them a taste of their own medicine when it comes to negotiating. Yeah. How is it going to work?
I think it will make things more complicated because the relationship between Beijing and Taiwan has already been complex, over the past years. And now, if Taiwan tries to, do some changes between the USA, China, and Taiwan, I think it will be very difficult, to fix this issue. And if Taiwan or the USA continues in this direction, I think that will definitively harm the relationship between the US and China.
Will it harm the relationship, or are we entering an era where we're seeing that the people who are rising to power, be it in the East or the West, are these tough-talking nationalist types that, in a way, we get back to what we were saying at the beginning, that Donald Trump and Xi Jinping might speak the same language?
Yeah, I think, yeah, that depends on the angle to observe this incident, I call it. I think for the time being, the situation is intense, as mentioned, because the one China policy is really a bottom line of China. Bottom line is a bottom line. If you touch that, then the situation will be really very difficult to fix. But I think one thing is sure is that Trump, I think, he tries to send one message to China, that we will in a very tough position facing China in the coming years.
Would a Chinese president take to social media network Weibo the way that Donald Trump takes to Twitter?
I don't think so. Because, we have different ways of resolving conflicts in China. We don't like conflicts in China. We don't try to create conflicts, So I don't think we'll use that.
Let's go back to those Sunday tweets by Donald Trump. In it, he said, did China ask us if it was okay to devalue their currency, making it hard for our companies to compete, heavily tax our products going into their country? The U.S. doesn't tax them, he says, or to build a massive military complex in the middle of the South China Sea? I don't think so. Andre Pietri, tell me, what's your reaction to those tweets?
Look, I'm investing a lot in technology, and the big word about all corporations in the world is disruption. And I have the impression that Trump is really disrupting politics. I mean, look at what's happening. And in Europe, I'm passionate about Europe, and I'm looking at our foreign affairs minister, who has not this name even in Europe. I'm almost dreaming of somebody who can have such much airtime as Trump is achieving. What is Trump achieving? And again, I'm not supporting what he's doing, but he's achieving to make international relationships much less this little elite thing, but making it probably a little bit more popular. For me, what he's doing is the voice of politics. He's bringing something which is very elite, which nobody understands, even the diplomats don't really understand, and we all see in this debate how difficult it is to talk about, okay, it's one China policy, but actually there are two countries, some people...
Because it's a complicated topic.
Exactly. It is a complicated topic, but in order to get people re-engaged, it's very important also to promote it. So I think, again, what he's doing has one virtue, is first to show that actually Donald Trump is probably not this isolationist that we all feared, that he would only care about the U.S. Look, he is.
But he's walking away from the
exactly.
free trade policy, the TPP.
But he's taking a lot of time also to explain what was his stance and his call on Taiwan, etc. So I think it's, yes, we're in a very big uncertainty, but what he's achieving, and I think we need to infuse that not only about populists like Trump, but among the general public of politicians, this capacity of probably having a much more direct relationship and explaining these topics. He's probably simplifying them, oversimplifying them, probably not preparing his case very well, but the other politicians rather do the same, probably with a little bit more, preparation.
We had on Tuesday, Alice Ekman, at Trump Tower, this announcement by the head of Japan's SoftBank Group that he and the people from a Taiwanese group, Foxconn, that make those components for Apple's iPhones and stuff, that they're going to invest heavily in the United States. So you had a Japanese businessman, Taiwanese businessman making this big announcement at Trump Tower. Again, is this part of the bargaining chip, or is this just, well, write the script as you go along?
For sure, it could be perceived as surprising. We have to understand that two presidential candidates, you had Trump and Hillary Clinton, right? And Clinton was one of the designers of the US pivot or rebalancing to Asia, right? And part of this pivot or rebalancing strategy is to reinforce the US economic presence, military presence in the region. And that was seen rather positively from a Chinese perspective. I mean, not the reinforcement of the rebalancing to Asia, but on the contrary, the fact that Trump, who was not openly supporting such policy, was elected, that was seen as maybe a game changer for China. But as you just mentioned, actually, we have signed now that economic and political relation between the US and its traditional allies and partners in the region, including Japan, including South Korea, but also including Taiwan, to some extent might be reinforced. We still don't know. There is a lot of unpredictability. It's hard really to anticipate, but I'm not sure that the rebalancing to Asia will erode after Trump's election.
Not sure it'll erode, because remember, he also said on the campaign trail that when it comes to, hey, we're tired of paying for South Korea and Japan for their military.
But we see contradictory signs here. And I wanted to highlight something else regarding the tweets that you mentioned earlier. Trump mentioned Taiwan, obviously, but he also mentioned South China Sea, right? Yeah. He mentioned South China Sea. And this is quite important, because South China Sea is a flashpoint, right? It's also a point of tension, not only between China and the US, which have completely different vision on the issue, but China and many of its neighbors in the South China Sea, including Vietnam, including Philippines, etc. So I would say that in a very short amount of time, in less than 2 days, Trump mentioned two of the core interests, or at least flashpoints, that are seen by Chinese foreign policy as core interests. And we have to take into account that from a Chinese foreign policy perspective, there is a strong hierarchy of priorities. There is this flashpoint, this core interest, where China has a clear position, and China does not want to negotiate or adjust its policy. It's clear-cut, it's part of its core interest, it's part of its sovereignty. That's how Beijing is communicating. I'm not saying it's good or bad, but that's what's perceived from a Chinese perspective. So from a Chinese perspective, the double tweets on Taiwan as South China Sea means that whatever the communication strategy, maybe they want to downplay it, but in real life, let's say in Beijing, I'm pretty sure that they are very annoyed, not to say pissed off, with this tweet. And I'm pretty sure that in the coming days, they will adjust not just the communication strategy and response toward this tweet, but also their own strategy towards Trump.
In which way will they readjust?
I was betting before the tweet series and just after the election, it was very hard to anticipate. But I was betting that Beijing would try to seduce Trump in the first stage, in the transition time period, just to see how he would react. And I was betting that China would test Trump more than Trump would test Xi Jinping. But in that case, I think they will readjust toward a tougher stance toward Donald Trump himself.
Very briefly, James Lacey, with Trump mentioning the South China Sea, and where, by the way, Taiwan also has claims, most notably in the Spratly Islands. Does that mean that the U.S. is willing to continue, despite what was said on the campaign trail, with its role as gendarme, if you will, that stands up to China in those waters?
Well, I think it will happen. And, it's not just Taiwan that has claims that are affected by China. Japan has claims to certain islands, and the Philippines has claims to certain islands that China has been transgressing against. So I think from the standpoint of our Pacific allies, this is not just a bilateral problem. It's one that our allies are all concerned with. I wanted to just briefly mention one thing, though, about the genius of this trade policy by Trump. People need to understand the political ramification. Republicans lost in 2008 against Obama. They lost in 2012 against McCain, and they lost critical states where we had lost manufacturing to China: Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. All those states came in for Trump, and Trump has given the Republican Party a path to victory. And, if these trade policies are to be criticized...
You mentioned John McCain. He penned an editorial op-ed piece in the Financial Times this Wednesday where he denounced the fact that the U.S. is walking away from the TPP because China's got its own policy, its own free trade deal that it's touting. He says politics abhors a vacuum, and Asian countries will gravitate towards China if U.S. influence is perceived as declining.
Yes, he did that, and yesterday he put out a press release praising Donald Trump for his selection of Secretary of Defense. So Trump has created an opportunity for Republicans to win in a way that John McCain has lost nationally. And I think that the import of the policy is that other larger issues, like, for example, the who is selected to the Supreme Court, which have been held into the balance, are going to be achieved because of Republican control that Donald Trump was able to achieve through these trade policies in the campaign.
Yann Li.
Yeah, can I just comment on what has been said from our friend of Los Angeles? I think in international system market and a very globally connected market, you cannot isolate, different parts. All the countries impact.
Can't say one thing one day and another the
right,
next.
and we cannot say that the USA is absolutely white, the China is absolutely black, and especially in the international market, I think the best solution is a win-win relationship. So let me just take a very short example. The American factories have been moved to China because there was lower cost,
Lower labor costs, yeah.
Labor cost, and also there were customers. There was a market. At the same time, if we talk about the pollution problem, for example, due to some of these factories moved to China, we have more pollution problem because these factories also contribute to the pollution problem. If I can see some of the Western, factories, so we cannot just say isolate all the different parts. And I think win-win is the best solution.
All right, we're going to leave it there. That's going to be the final word. I want to thank you, Yann Li. I want to thank as well Andre Luz-Krog-Pietri, Alice Ekman, James Lacey for being with us from Los Angeles. Stay with us. Our Media Watch segment is next. And we say hello to James Creedon.
Hi, François. So we were just talking about Donald Trump, and he was named the Person of the Year by Time magazine. So every year they name a personality, and it's
last year was Merkel, right?
That's right, and often it's interpreted as an honour for that particular person. But Time magazine always says, no, we're just saying that this person marked the year. So anyway, that always generates a degree of discussion.
It says, I noticed this. It says, President of the Divided States of America, it says on the cover.
Well, we're now apparently in a post-truth age, according to, was it the word of the year identified by the Oxford Dictionary. And indeed, there are different interpretations of facts, of reality. And indeed, there's a lot of people are criticising the mainstream media, Time representing the mainstream media. So I think in choosing Donald Trump and in then, I guess, editorializing a bit by calling him the president of the divided states of America,
and
perhaps Time we're hoping to appeal to everybody, right? Because those who don't like Donald Trump, they will agree with the fact that he represents a very divided United States. Those who do like Donald Trump will be quite happy to see him as Time Person of the Year. But the actual comments on this tweet, I think, in itself says a lot. The MSM, the mainstream media, hates Trump, and although he was Person of the Year, they say they had to say he divided the United States of America. So there you go. That in itself, I think, speaks volumes. Congratulations to President-elect Trump on being Times Person of the Year. I assume Hillary came in second, says one would presume a Trump supporter. And again, getting back to what I was just talking about, the fact that they don't always pick somebody because they are wonderful people. Indeed, Adolf Hitler was chosen in 1938. Various other...
That always comes up. That's an old...
It does always come up. It does always come up. But indeed, and he wasn't the only controversial person in history. There were many, Ayatollah Khomeini and others, I think, were chosen as Times Person of the Year. It is interesting to see the extent to which the Time magazine itself has kind of flip-flopped, you could say, over the course of the past 12 months. Some of their covers featuring what we think is Donald Trump, but we can't quite be sure because it's
this was predicting
cryptic.
his defeat. We talked about this.
That's right. Meltdown, total meltdown, and then, well, I think there's another series of images here that show that there was one in the middle. Meltdown, total meltdown, then President-elect, and then Person of the Year. I suppose Trump supporters would be quite happy with that progression of things. And to get back to what you were talking about in the debate, François, vis-a-vis relations with China, relations with Taiwan, etc., that's also been generating a lot of comments online. Many theories abounding about that controversial phone call to Taiwan. Was it sheer, was it negligence? Was it a massive faux pas? Was it very deliberate, and to what extent was it planned or not planned? To what extent should we be worried about Donald Trump and his temperament? This is an article that appeared in The New Yorker a few days ago saying that the problem with Donald Trump is what he doesn't know, but in fact the people he surrounded himself with know what he doesn't know. In other words, is he open to being manipulated? Is he open to being influenced by people who have perhaps certain plans? They mention John Bolton, former ambassador to the UN, US ambassador to the UN, who had a long meeting with Donald Trump prior to this phone call, who has in the past called on the US to use the Taiwan card, as he says. In other words, to create tensions with Beijing for what he considers would be the US benefit down the line. In any case, The New Yorker says this is somewhat worrying because it means that he could be open to being manipulated by perhaps individuals with an agenda that he doesn't fully grasp. That's one theory. There are many theories as to what happened.
All right, many theories indeed. I want to thank you, James Creedon. And again, we'll have to see who is whispering in his ear and whether or not he is the man calling the shots.
Indeed.
I want to thank our panel once again. Thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.